Good morning. Today's focus, we're going to look at the Mongol Empire. Now, the Mongol Empire was one of the largest empires to ever exist in world history. And in fact, the only empire that's going to surpass them in modern history is going to be that of the British Empire. And that's not going to come about till really about the 18th century, where it reaches its pinnacle. Let's get to it, shall we? You have a few things that I want you to do today. On your timeline, if you could put the following three dates on there, that'd be desired. So 1206 CE, Genghis Khan achieved power. 1227, his death, and 1368 is kind of the end of the Mongol Khanate. This is where the Mongol Empire dwindles away. Now there are different locations. We'll talk about those in today's lesson. So feel free over the course of this to pause, stop, rewind, anything that you want. Okay, you can kind of control me, if you will, so you understand the content today. All right. So having your notes or writing utensil out to go along with this, when we talk about the Mongols, they originate from the central steppes in Asia. And as you look at the graphic on the screen, the green area, and I'll highlight it with my mouse here, this is predominantly where the Mongols are going to come from. Now, before climate change kind of alters history a little bit in their homeland, this is a very lush grassland and savanna before it becomes a lot more arid and dry and eventually leads to desertification. Now, one of the notable individuals that we'll talk about today is Genghis Khan. Predominantly in the Western world we see it as Genghis Khan, but in Mongolian it's Chinggis Khan. So if you see one or both of those names, they're the same person, and it actually stands for something that we'll get into here in just a little while. But he's the one that forges the Mongol tribes together that before him are really disunified. So again, you can see the steppes of Central Asia, predominantly right here. This just looks at grasslands across the United States, or the world, sorry. And over here in North America, that grassland is going to be very similar to what we have here in the Great Plains. Now, Genghis Khan, that is not his real name. That actually stands for Universal Ruler, and he won't get that until 1206 CE when he comes to power. Now, he's originally born Temujin. That's his original name. He was the son of royalty until his father was poisoned and killed, and he himself was taken into exile and kind of tortured. And I have some readings today that go along with today that'll talk more about his past life before he becomes the Great Khan. So he's responsible for uniting the warring tribes of the Mongols together. The Mongol Empire is going to stretch from 1206 to 1368 CE. So in the grand scheme of world history, this empire really doesn't last all that long, but they are very influential in the time that they do exist. Now, Genghis Khan, he was a raider. He was able to take a ton of territory, usually by conquest. The only issue that he did not do is establish a central capital. What he does, or what his successors do afterwards, they're the ones that are responsible for bringing kind of the Mongols under a central authority. Now, the Mongols had incredible equestrian skills. That means they could ride horses extremely well. Often they were put on a horse around age 3, and they were able to do a lot of things on a horse that a lot of people have trouble or difficulty with doing just on foot. And so they use this to their advantage. Their warfare is lightning quick. They're able to circum their opponents. They're able to shoot on the horses with bows and arrows. And their mobility is second to none at this point in world history. Now, often their arrival would be quicker than kind of the word of mouth in this part of history. So what that means is that often Genghis Khan and the other Mongols would arrive on a village or a city before the inhabitants even knew they were coming. So what happened? Enemies who surrendered without resistance usually were spared, whereas those that resisted, usually the entire population was slaughtered, men, women, and children. So looking at this map, you can see the capital, Karakorum, here of the Mongol Empire. And the red lines denote campaigns led by Genghis Khan, all right, throughout the known world. And you can see a lot of attacks on China, but then also he takes this into Afghanistan, through Iran, and even into the Mesopotamia Valley as well. Now once he dies, his successors also lead attacks on modern-day Eastern Europe. So all in all, it's a pretty large empire you can see here, stretching from the Pacific all the way to the Mediterranean. Now, where do they start? The conquest of China began in 1211 CE, and by 1220, about 9 years later, the Mongols had established control over northern China. Now this lasts for a while. 1227, Genghis Khan dies, and his contributions, like we talked about, he united the Mongols, he controlled China in the east, Persia in the west, and he eventually extended the empire all the way to the Mediterranean Sea. Now, some of his blunders or mistakes that he could have improved upon to really solidify the Mongol Empire would have been to create a central government and also to denote a clear heir to the empire. When he died, he left it wide open, and so there was a lot of feuding and a lot of problems internally between the sons and grandsons of Genghis Khan. Now, looking at this timeline, it's on a loop, so you can kind of see the Mongol Empire as it starts in 1206 CE and spreads across Central Asia. And the red denotes Genghis and his empire. But as you can see towards the end there, when it splits into 4 different factions, that's what happens precisely after his death and how the empire is divided. So like we talked about, there is an extreme power vacuum between the sons and grandsons. The 4 regional empires that are divided are such as follows. The Great Khans in China. Now this would have been the primary, the wealthiest land that the Mongols would have had. So China was the primary Khanate. The Khanate of Chahati is in Central Asia. Now this is a very mountainous region. There's not really a whole lot there. The Elkhans of Persia and the Golden Hordes of Russia. This map kind of shows you where we're at with the Khanates in this part of world history, circa 1300 CE. So here's the Khanate of the Great Khan. This would have been China. This would have been the most desired. Okay, Central Asia, the Golden Horde of Russia, and the Khanate of Persia. Now, one thing that the Mongols do is they expedite the process of Eastern influence on the West. And more specifically, that we're going to start to talk about later this week, is that of the plague. Now, in the 1330s, the plague erupts in southwest China, and by the 1340s, it reaches across to southwest Asia, the modern Middle East, and then into Europe. And a lot of it follows trade routes, and a lot of it has to do with the expansion of the Mongol Empire as well. So, by doing this, the bubonic plague spreads across the majority of Eurasia. It kills more than half of the exposed population. I think it has a kill rate of about 75%, so that's pretty high. And what this does is it really hinders the Mongol Empire in the sense that it caused severe depopulation and labor shortages. And in addition, the plague conditions and the oppression of the Mongols fostered a rebellious subject population. So eventually the Mongol Empire is going to be torn down internally before it is overcome by external forces. Now, in the wake of the Mongol decline, we see the rise of the Turkish Muslim states, And you can see there are really three. I know this map denotes four, but the Ottoman Empire, the Safavid Empire, and the Mughal Empire in India. And so these khanates slowly disappear, and this is what rises after this. Now, these are going to really usher us into the 20th century. For example, the Ottoman Empire is going to be a legitimate authority all the way until World War I, before it's broken apart. That concludes kind of the Mongol Empire. Tomorrow we're going to talk more about the bubonic plague and how that fits into the broad theme of conflict for this unit, as there is a lot of conflict with human survival throughout Eurasia, but we're going to focus more so on what happens in Europe and how the bubonic plague devastates that specific population. In addition, to wrap up today, there are some PDF files that are located on my website, troxelsclassroom.com. I would prefer that you access those in the order that they're presented. And some of it is going to look at the life of Genghis Khan. It's also going to examine the 10 things about Genghis Khan, the top 10 things. And lastly, you're going to look at primary sources. And you are going to analyze primary sources from multiple sources. And you are going to denote or create a thesis statement based on that. Please read the directions. The instructions are very thorough, and I will see you tomorrow. Good luck.